Chapter 3461, Chapter 535, Legend of War Goddess. Chapter 3461, Chapter 535, Legend of War Goddess. Chapter 535, Legend of War Goddess. Withered Sea City. When the players in the city noticed a war goddess suddenly appearing in the sky, the whole city erupted into commotion. There's not just a war goddess there. There's also a dragon. Isn't that black flame riding on the back of that dragon? What's going on? Is the Azura Sword Emperor planning to attack Withered Sea City? Curiosity filled everyone in the city when they saw the war goddess and dragon in the sky. Everyone got especially excited when they noticed the Azura Sword Emperor riding on the back of the dragon. Too long. It had been far too long since any individual dared to challenge an upper-ranking hegemonic power. Previously, everyone thought yesterday's attack on Withered Sea City was already the Azura Sword Emperor's limit, that it was the best he could do. After all, Withered Sea City was a stronghold operated by 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. The defensive magic array alone could easily withstand a siege of over 100 Tier 6 players. Not to mention, there was also the city's magic barrier that could weaken the basic attributes of enemies. Even if Black Flame was the strongest player in the miniature ancient world, if he tried to attack Withered Sea City all by himself, it was unlikely he could leave with his life. Yet, now, Black Flame had taken the initiative to attack Withered Sea City by himself. This was simply unbelievable. Is Black Flame crazy? The Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe now have 4 Tier 6 experts safeguarding Withered Sea City. Even if he can summon a Tier 5 war goddess, what can he possibly do to the city? Maybe Black Flame probably doesn't know about this. After all, Hades, Primal, and Sacred had secretly shown us the additional forces they mobilized to assure us. There's a chance news of the 3 powers' strength has yet to reach Zero Wing and the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Regardless, this is going to be interesting. Even at Tier 5, a war goddess can still pose a significant threat in the miniature ancient world. We can use this opportunity to see how powerful this Tier 5 war goddess can be and come up with the appropriate countermeasures. There were currently several dozen players originating from various upper-ranking hegemonic powers present in the Hades Society's residence, and they couldn't help but be surprised to see a war goddess and a dragon appearing above Withered Sea City. The Lord of War Goddesses. This was the new title the 7 Luminaries Alliance had given to Black Flame. Even if Black Flame was only a Tier 5 player, they still had no choice but to take him seriously. After all, there were many examples of powerful guilds facing destruction at the hands of war goddesses in the greater god's domain. Now that Black Flame had come to attack Withered Sea City with a Tier 5 war goddess, this was an excellent opportunity for them to gather information. If Black Flame's war goddess could not deal with the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe, they could band together without worry. And if the war goddess caused significant losses to the 3 powers, they would remain neutral. That way, no matter who won or lost, they wouldn't lose. Are we really going to do this, guild leader? Standing atop the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon, Su Qianliu couldn't help but grow worried as she looked at the city beneath her. An offensive siege was different from a defensive siege. Participants of an offensive siege would be subjected to the suppression of the besieged city's magic barrier, and it was why Zero Wing and Azura could fend off an attack by 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. They would have no such advantages if they were to attack Withered Sea City now. And on the chance they suffered defeat, the advantages Zero Wing had built up would be lost. It's just 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. They're still not worthy of my fear, Shifeng calmly said as he looked at the prosperous city below. Shifeng had always planned to make the miniature ancient world into Zero Wing's backyard, having it become a continuous supply of talent and resources for Zero Wing. That way, Zero Wing would have an easier time establishing a foothold in the Eternal Realm. Not to mention, now that the miniature ancient world had become a resting point for multiple realms in the Void Sea, it could also provide Zero Wing with a stable source of star coins, which would, in turn, stabilize Zero Wing's economy in the real world. After saying so, Shifeng took out the Feather of Oath and used Heroic Pledge to forcibly upgrade the war goddess next to him, instantly elevating her into a level 164, Tier 6 war goddess. At the same time, the war goddess began radiating a terrifying divine might that covered a radius of tens of thousands of yards. Go on, It's time to let them know despair. Without hesitation, Shifeng commanded the war goddess to execute her strongest move, the Tier 6 unique skill Void Blast, against Withered Sea City. In response, the war goddess clad in silver armor aimed her longbow at Withered Sea City and drew it into a full moon, a large fourfold magic array forming in front of the arrowhead. Then, divine patterns started to form around the magic array, the appearance of every divine pattern enhancing the magic array's power by a notch. Thousands of divine patterns simultaneously strengthened the magic array, causing it to become so powerful that its mere presence shattered the surrounding space. Tier 6. That's a Tier 6 war goddess. Meanwhile, following the war goddess's promotion to Tier 6, all players in Withered Sea City fell into bewilderment. It was not unheard of for players and powers to summon war goddesses in the greater god's domain. Aside from special items, they could also be summoned using summoning arrays. However, the best these items and summoning arrays could do was summon a Tier 5 war goddess. As for players summoning Tier 6 war goddesses, that was unheard of. After all, Tier 6 war goddesses were legends and apex combatants in the greater god's domain. They were existences that would only appear in realm wars or battles of that scale. However, before anyone in Withered Sea City could return to their senses, the war goddess let loose the silver arrow narked in her longbow, and the arrow transformed into a dazzling star that descended onto the city. Boom! For a moment, it was as if the sun had appeared in Withered Sea City. Players standing several kilometers away from the city could clearly see and feel the intensity of the light and heat coming from the miniature star. After some time passed, the radiance that enveloped the city disappeared, revealing a sight that dumbfounded Su Qianliu. Gone. The entire Withered City was gone. A main city that was populated by over 30 million players was erased from existence. Just like that. We can go back now. While looking at the tattered remains of Withered Sea City's walls, Shifeng instructed, have Blackie and the others come to take over and rebuild the city. Then, proceed with the plans we previously discussed. Before this, Shifeng didn't wish to publicize that he could summon a Tier 6 war goddess. This was because a Tier 6 war goddess's influence was so significant that it might lead to many pseudo-apex powers taking extreme measures. However, to let Zero Wing gain more benefits from the miniature ancient world, he decided it was no longer necessary to hide this information. He couldn't stay in the miniature ancient world long term. He would even take many capable individuals to the Eternal Realm with him. If Zero Wing lacked sufficient deterrence, it wouldn't be able to retain its portion of benefits in the miniature ancient world. Okay, Su Qianliu instinctively replied, her mind still having yet to return to its senses. Subsequently, following Shifeng returned to Abyssal Star City with Su Qianliu and had Blackie bring some members over to Withered Sea City by ship to capture and rebuild it. It was impossible to destroy a city in God's domain fully. So long as the City Lord's token remained, a city could be rebuilt, even if it was thoroughly demolished. The possibility of the City Lord's token not being within Withered Sea City was also zero. If a City Lord's token was taken out of the city, or if the City Lord's mansion was destroyed, it would be teleported back to the City Lord's mansion automatically. This was a setting put in place so that players wouldn't have to worry about being unable to take over a city after capturing it. Meanwhile, shortly after Blackie and the other members of Zero Wing arrived at Withered Sea City, they couldn't help but be surprised by what they found. Or, more specifically, what they failed to find. Many foreign players who came to Withered Sea City to rest were similarly shocked by the city's sudden disappearance. But less than half an hour after the city's disappearance, specific information about the city's destruction quickly appeared on the Miniature Ancient World's official forum. For a time, the entire Miniature Ancient World fell into silence. Now that Black Flame had come to attack Withered Sea City with a Tier 5 war goddess, this was an excellent opportunity for them to gather information. If Black Flame's war goddess could not deal with the Hades Society, Primal Empire, and Sacred Tribe, they could band together without worry. And if the war goddess caused significant losses to the three powers, they would remain neutral. That way, no matter who won or lost, they wouldn't lose. Are we really going to do this, Guild Leader? Standing atop the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon, Su Qianliu couldn't help but grow worried as she looked at the city beneath her. An offensive siege was different from a defensive siege. Participants of an offensive siege would be subjected to the suppression of the besieged city's magic barrier, and it was why Zero Wing and Azura could fend off an attack by 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. They would have no such advantages if they were to attack Withered Sea City now. And on the chance they suffered defeat, the advantages Zero Wing had built up would be lost. It's just 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. They're still not worthy of my fear, Shifeng calmly said as he looked at the prosperous city below. Shifeng had always planned to make the miniature ancient world into Zero Wing's backyard, having it become a continuous supply of talent and resources for Zero Wing. That way, Zero Wing would have an easier time establishing a foothold in the Eternal Realm. Not to mention, now that the miniature ancient world had become a resting point for multiple realms in the Void Sea, it could also provide Zero Wing with a stable source of star coins, which would, in turn, stabilize Zero Wing's economy in the real world. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3462, Chapter 536, 3 Absolutes. Chapter 3462, Chapter 536, 3 Absolutes. Chapter 536, 3 Absolutes. I went to Withered Sea City, but it was gone. Can someone tell me what happened? Are you sleep-talking? Or are you trying to pull a trick on us? That's Withered Sea City we are talking about, a city operated by 3 upper-ranking hegemonic powers. You must have gone to the wrong place. I have a picture of my map and my current location. I even visited Withered Sea City once before. There's no way I could have gone to the wrong place. As more and more players tried to visit Withered Sea City to rest, more evidence of Withered Sea City's disappearance appeared on the official forum, stunning many players who were still doubtful of the situation. Withered Sea City occupied an island that spanned dozens of kilometers. However, in the images shared on the official forum, where Withered Sea City used to occupy was now a huge crater. It was also possible to see tattered remains of the city's walls. It looked as if the entire city had been erased off the island, and this devastation sent shivers down the spines of all who saw it. While everyone was wondering how Withered Sea City had fallen to ruin in such a short time, videos showing the process of the city's destruction suddenly started to appear on the forum, one after another. These videos were taken from varying distances, but they all had a common point. The videos showed Black Flame, the Azura Sword Emperor, suddenly appearing above Withered Sea City with a war goddess. Afterward, the war goddess could be seen firing an arrow at the city, causing the city to become engulfed in a dazzling radiance upon impact. Then, when the radiance disappeared, so did Withered Sea City. Boundary Sea, Abyssal Star City. When the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon landed in the courtyard of Zero Wing's residence, before Shifeng could even get down, he heard deafening cheers and shouts coming from outside the residence. Look! It's Guild Leader Black Flame. Oh my god! It's the real deal. He's too cool. Hooray for the Tier 6 War Goddess. Hooray for Guild Leader Black Flame. Let's see if those foreigners dare to continue looking down on us native players. The number of players queuing up outside Zero Wing's residence was several times greater than yesterday. Moreover, many of them were Tier 5 experts. And when these players saw Shifeng appearing in the courtyard, they couldn't help but get the urge to charge into the residence. Fortunately, the Zero Wing members on duty were prepared for this situation as they had long erected a magic barrier at the entrance, prohibiting those without permission from entering. Meanwhile, in the courtyard of Zero Wing's residence, the many executives of the Azura Mercenary Alliance who had long been waiting for Shifeng's return promptly surrounded him as soon as he got off the Frostflame Dragon. You've really given us a scare this time, Guild Leader Black Flame, Liu Wusheng said with a wry smile. Also, everyone's already talking about how you destroyed Withered Sea City with just one blow, and many hegemonic powers have come to us hoping to join Azura. Hidden Soul is swamped with work right now. The individual strength Shifeng had shown before was already astonishing, but the means he just showed was even more astonishing. Originally, Liu Wusheng thought that whether it was Zero Wing or the Azura Mercenary Alliance, the best they could do was survive in the miniature ancient world. This situation wouldn't change unless they could find a way to produce a large number of Tier 6 experts. However, following the Tier 6 War Goddess's appearance, the miniature ancient world's status quo thoroughly changed. Now, many ordinary hegemonic powers have expressed their desire to join the Azura Mercenary Alliance, which put Liu Wusheng in a huge dilemma. It was undoubtedly great news for the Azura Mercenary Alliance to have more foreign hegemonic powers join. After all, unlike individual players joining Azura, powers that chose to join the Mercenary Alliance would be required to enter an offensive and defensive pact. In other words, they would be standing in the same boat as Azura. This, in turn, would increase Azura's strength and influence in the miniature ancient world. However, the addition of a large number of foreign hegemonic powers would also weaken the position of native powers in the Mercenary Alliance. After all, the various foreign hegemonic powers were much stronger than the various native powers. This was true in both the miniature ancient world and the greater God's domain. Every hegemonic power occupied a vast territory, with some even monopolizing an entire empire. Depending on how the situation was handled, even Azura's founding powers, such as Witch's Sin, might have to worry about getting pushed out of the Mercenary Alliance's inner circle of power. For this reason, Mysterious Moon hurriedly sent Lin Yaoyu and Zhou Yalin, who were relatively close to Shifeng, to inquire about Shifeng's plans for the future. The 100-Flower Palace had also sent Crimson Heart and Cleansing Rue for the same reason. Originally, after experiencing the miniature ancient world's 4 months of accelerated development, the various founding powers of Azura believed that they had already caught up to Zero Wing's pace. They even thought they could already stand at the same height as Shifeng. Yet, in reality, not only did the gap between them and Shifeng not shrink in the slightest, but it had even widened by a lot. Foreign hegemonic powers have asked to join? Shifeng wasn't particularly surprised to hear Liu Wusheng's words. Nodding, he said, "Tell Sol that she can let them join, but in addition to requiring them to dispatch personnel to safeguard Azura's cities long-term, they will also only receive 1/3 of the contribution points that early Alliance members receive when contributing talents to the Alliance. And if they want to access the Primordial Tower's 2nd floor that's still off-limits to the public, they will have to pay double what early members are paying." "Okay. I'll notify Hidden Soul right away," Liu Wusheng said, feeling a little relieved when he heard Shifeng's arrangement. The Azura Mercenary Alliance was established with the primary goal of serving Zero Wing. When Witch's Sin and the other native powers initially chose to join Azura, they had done so because of the potential they saw in Shifeng and Zero Wing. And as they had predicted, they did achieve rapid growth after joining the Azura Mercenary Alliance. But this growth came at the cost of a large amount of Azura contribution points. On an even playing field, there was no way native powers like Witch's Sin could outcompete the various foreign hegemonic powers when it came to earning contribution points. But if the acquisition rates were tweaked in favor of old members, it would be more or less possible for them to compete against the newly joined hegemonic powers. However, what Liu Wusheng didn't know was that Shifeng had always planned to prioritize nurturing the miniature ancient world's native players. After all of them came from the same world. If the miniature ancient world's native players grew strong, it would become less likely for their civilization to get eliminated in the greater world. Meanwhile, after Shifeng finished arranging the Azura Mercenary Alliance's future development and management issues, Gentle Snow suddenly entered his office in a hurry. "Guild leader, an elven sword saint from the pseudo-apex power Azure Fang says she wants to meet you," Gentle Snow said. Then, she hesitantly continued, "The other party claims that she is Azure Fang's 3rd vice guild leader Orbeth, but apart from Azure Fang's guild emblem, she has nothing else to prove her identity." Since adventuring with Ink Cheline, Gentle Snow had come to learn a lot about the greater God's domain. So, she was very much aware of how terrifying a pseudo-apex power could be. Take the Scarlet Merchant Alliance, for example. Even in a place such as the Crystal City of Secrets, where titled experts occupied the lowest level of the city's social hierarchy, the players operating in the city would still actively make way when encountering the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's members. Now that someone claiming to be a vice-guild leader of Azure Fang had come knocking on Zero Wing's doors, if the situation wasn't handled correctly, Zero Wing might find itself with another powerful foe. An elven sword saint named Orbeth? When Shifeng heard the name Gentle Snow mentioned, he couldn't help but feel as if he had heard it from somewhere before. Yet, he couldn't remember where he had heard it from. "Do you have her picture?" Here is a video clip I recorded, Gentle Snow said as she shared a short clip with Shafong. In the recording, a 2-meter-tall elven woman with grey hair could be seen standing in the lobby of Zero Wings Guild Hall. The woman looked young, no more than 21 or 22 years old. Even though the video had clearly captured the woman, one would fail to notice her presence if one wasn't paying attention. It was as if the woman did not exist in this world. Meanwhile, Shafong couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this grey-haired elven woman. Why is one of the three absolutes here? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3463, Chapter 537, Goddess Lore. Chapter 3463, Chapter 537, Goddess Lore. Chapter 537, Goddess Lore. One of the three absolutes? Gentle Snow ran Shafong's words through her mind when she saw the look of surprise on his face. However, she couldn't recall ever hearing about the title Shafong mentioned. Is this person famous? She will be in the future, Shafong explained when he saw Gentle Snow's curious gaze. But I doubt many people know of her right now. The Eternal Realm's three absolutes were known by all in the Greater God's domain during his previous life, and they were publicly known to be able to stand against an entire realm by themselves. This was by no means a form of praise. Instead, the three absolutes truly did accomplish the feat of going up against an entire realm. As for when the three absolutes had risen to fame, it was during the war between human players and holy race players. Meanwhile, Blood Elf Orbeth, the blood-soaked Rakshasa, was one of the three absolutes, and she was someone who had perfectly inherited a goddess lore. However, as far as Shafong could remember, he had never heard of the blood-soaked Rakshasa joining any powers. In fact, most people didn't even know how she came to possess the strength that allowed her to become an absolute. When Orbeth first debuted on the public stage, she had already accomplished a feat that shook the entire Eternal Realm. At the time, she had single-handedly fought 37 Tier 6 experts from the Holy Race and defeated them. It should be known that these 37 Tier 6 experts possessed combat power rivaling Tier 6 gods. Yet, the blood-soaked Rakshasa had not only killed all of them, but she even survived the fight with only her soul severely injured. Meanwhile, the next time Orbeth made a move was several months later, when the Holy Race had declared a holy war on the Greater God's domain and mobilized an army composed of the members of thousands of major powers. During that war, Orbeth had slain thousands of Tier 6 experts from the Holy Race. And unlike her debut battle, she only sustained light injuries from the war. It was also after that war that she became known as the blood-soaked Rakshasa. As for her becoming one of the three absolutes, it was during another war with the Holy Race that took place at the 12 Sanctuaries. At the time, Orbeth had single-handedly defended an entire fortress from one of the Holy Race's apex powers. Even after continuously trying for 2 months, the enemy apex power failed to bring down the fortress. Yet, now, the blood-soaked Rakshasa had suddenly become a member of the pseudo-apex power Azure Fang. Moreover, she wasn't even in the Eternal Realm. This situation was wildly different from the information Shafong knew. Do you want to meet her? Gentle Snow asked. Yes, of course, Shafong nodded. The three absolutes were legendary individuals in the Greater God's domain. Even the various apex powers would do everything they could to recruit them, let alone him. Orbeth was someone who had fully mastered a goddess lore. Once she progressed to Tier 6, the lore projection she could form would be vastly superior to the average advanced lore projection. Even though Shafong had multiple advanced lores during his previous life, his lore projection would still be suppressed if it went up against Orbeth's lore projection. Now that there was an opportunity to meet with one of the three absolutes, Shafong naturally wouldn't let go of it. Zero Wings Guild Leader's office. Gentle Snow walked into the office with Orbeth. The instant Orbeth stepped through the door, Shafong could feel an indescribable pressure weighing down on him. Her mana affinity is at an even higher level than mine. Shafong couldn't help but be astonished as he looked at Orebs. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that his Tier 5 advanced legendary mana body was unprecedented in the Greater God's domain. Yet, his mana had lost to Orbeth's despite this. Meanwhile, Orbeth also noticed something when she stepped into the room, But she didn't seem to mind it much as she sat down on the sofa gentle Snow had led her to. "Hello, Guild Leader Black Flame. Thank you for taking the time to meet me," Orbith greeted. Despite looking rather young, she had a mature and intellectual voice. "You jest, Vice Guild Leader Orbith. It is Zero Wing's honor to have a Vice Guild Leader of Azure Fang visit," Shifeng responded politely. "May I know why you have asked to meet me, Vice Guild Leader Orbith?" "It brings me shame to say this, but," looking a little embarrassed, Orbith said, "I am very keen to enter the Eternal Realm, but I lack the means. Even Azure Fang doesn't have any way to help me. However, while resting in a fortress in the Void Sea, I was fortunate enough to learn that you have previously appeared in the Eternal Realm, Guild Leader Black Flame. But now, here you are in the miniature ancient world. Are you asking me to take you to the Eternal Realm, Vice Guild Leader Orbith?" Shifeng asked, not feeling particularly surprised by Orbith's revelation. The moment he returned to the miniature ancient world, anyone with a keen mind would have guessed that he had a means of traveling between realms. "I know traveling between realms is not an easy feat and must come at a great cost," Guild Leader Black Flame. Confidently, Orbith said, "I am willing to foot the cost, and I guarantee you'll be satisfied by my payment." "You'll guarantee my satisfaction?" Shifeng chuckled. With his previous life's experiences, few things could catch his eye in the greater god's domain. "May I know what is the payment you speak of?" As if waiting for this question, Orbith promptly said, "An entry slot to the upper level of the Eternal Realm's Golden Spire. As to what the Golden Spire is, I'm sure you should be more familiar with it than I am." "A slot to the Golden Spire's upper level?" Shifeng was quite surprised by Orbith's offer. The Eternal Realm had the 7 cities, 4 towers, and 3 absolutes. Among them, the Golden Spire was one of the 4 towers. The Golden Spire contained countless treasures belonging to gods. There were even fragmented divine artifacts available inside. However, if players wished to obtain these treasures, they would first have to pass the Golden Spire's trials. The Golden Spire's trials were split into 2 levels, the lower level and the upper level. Players required a key to enter and challenge the Golden Spire's trials, and each key only allowed 2 players to enter the spire. The Golden Spire's keys were incredibly hard to come by. They were scattered across the Eternal Realm, and even upper-ranking hegemonic powers might not come across a key for the lower level after a month of searching. The chances of finding a key for the upper level were even lower, with only 1 upper-level key being found for every 100 or so lower-level keys. They were so rare that even apex powers might not find one after a year of searching. Because of this, whenever an upper-level key was found, the various powers would do everything they could to secure it. Apex powers even offered 3 legendary weapons to purchase an upper-level key. During his previous life, Shifeng had never obtained an upper-level key. Through Zero Wing's strength, he only managed to obtain a few lower-level keys. Meanwhile, the reward for passing the upper-level trial was a gold ancient tome. This gold ancient tome could provide detailed information on all worldly items, but players only had one opportunity to look up the item they wanted. The ancient tome would become useless after one use. In the past, many experts who had passed the upper-level trial had relied on the gold ancient tome they acquired to obtain a fragmented divine artifact. Currently, Shifeng had a headache finding the 7 Luminaries' Codex's fragments. If he could obtain a gold ancient tome, it would undoubtedly alleviate some of his problems. Not even apex powers can necessarily get their hands on one of the Golden Spire's upper-level keys right now, Orbith explained. If you enter the Golden Spire's upper level, even obtaining a fragmented divine artifact might not be out of the question, Guild Leader Black Flame. It will definitely be worthwhile to trade 1 entry slot to the Eternal Realm for this opportunity, don't you think? It is indeed a worthwhile deal, Shifeng said after pondering for a moment. But if you wish to enter the Eternal Realm, I need you to agree to a condition, Vice Guild Leader Orbith. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3464, Chapter 538, Meeting Aqua Rose Again. Chapter 3464, Chapter 538, Meeting Aqua Rose Again. Chapter 538, Meeting Aqua Rose Again. What condition? Orbith asked, frowning a little when she heard Shifeng's words. She felt that Shifeng was asking for too much. The entry slot for the Golden Spire's upper level was exceedingly rare and precious. After all, according to her investigations, players could potentially obtain a fragmented divine artifact if they were strong enough. Meanwhile, a fragmented divine artifact was something that could grant Tier 5 players the strength to fight against Tier 6 players. Hence, simply the opportunity to obtain a fragmented divine artifact was easily worth much more than an entry slot for the Eternal Realm. Shifeng noticed the unhappy expression on Orbitha's face, and he couldn't help but chuckle as he said, "Don't misunderstand me, Vice Guild Leader Orbith. I'm not asking for more payment. I just need you to keep quiet about the exact method you used to enter the Eternal Realm." An opportunity to enter the Golden Spire's upper level was tempting, but the Abyss Workshop certification wasn't an ordinary item worth exposing for such an opportunity. Its ability to transport multiple people across realms at a relatively affordable cost was especially valuable. Now that he had returned to the miniature ancient world, it would only be a matter of time before others noticed something. And if he helped Orbith, others would notice it even sooner. However, exactly how he traveled between realms was a crucial point he wished to keep secret. Plenty of people were trying to get into the Eternal Realm right now. If even an expert such as Orbith was willing to make such a lucrative offer to enter the Eternal Realm, it went without saying other experts would be in a similar situation. In that case, he would have plenty of business opportunities in the future, and having his methods remain unknown would give him a bigger advantage during negotiations. You can rest assured on this point, Guild Leader Black Flame. I can sign a God's Domain contract promising this, Orbith said, expressing her understanding. If others ask how I entered the Eternal Realm, I will say that I arrived there after accidentally entering a space-time passage. That won't be necessary, Shifeng said, waving his hand. If they ask about it, you can tell them the truth and say I helped you. Tell them the truth. Orbith couldn't help but look at Shifeng in surprise. The ability to enter the Eternal Realm from the outside world was earth-shattering. The various pseudo-Apex and Apex powers would try to obtain this ability at all costs if they learned about it. The at all costs here wouldn't necessarily mean they would pay anything to obtain it. Instead, there was a high possibility they would outright demand Shifeng hand over the method. But since Shifeng dared to say so, it meant he was confident he could go against the various Apex powers. Though, exactly what was giving him that confidence remained unknown. After all, having one Tier 6 war goddess was nowhere near enough to get the various Apex powers to acknowledge him as an equal. Following this, Shifeng signed a God's Domain contract with Orbith, the contract stating that Shifeng would help Orbith enter the Eternal Realm. In return, Orbith must not tell others the exact method she used to enter the Eternal Realm, and she also must bring Shifeng into the Golden Spire a week after they entered the Eternal Realm unless Shifeng himself asked for a delay. 3 days later. After arranging the defenses of Withered Sea City, setting up a new Great Grandmaster defensive magic array, and ensuring the city reopened successfully, Shifeng used the Abyss Workshop certification's world-breaking teleportation to open a world-breaking gate to the Eternal Realm. This time, he brought Su Qianliu, Wu Xiaoxiao, Midsummer, Rampant Blade, Jun Luosho, Wordless Ember, Sleeping Quicksand, Hidden Soul, Liu Wuxing, Galaxy Past, Crimson Heart, Sound Reaver, and Orbith with him. After including Desolate Fury, Cross, La Roja, Ink Cheline, Riverlight, and Blaze Eye, they filled up all 20 slots of the world-breaking teleportation's 20 teleportation slots. Upon returning to the Eternal Realm's Crystal City of Secrets, Ink Cheline and the others eagerly entered the underground Crystal Palace. But because Shifeng had to go to the Golden Spire with Orbith, he could only have Gentle Snow lead Su Qianliu and the others to explore the underground Crystal Palace with Scarecrow Fox's team. Ink Cheline had no objections to teaming up with Zero Wing and Azura's members. After all, it would be highly beneficial for Scarecrow Fox to do so. Firstly, Su Qianliu and the others were all equipped with secret treasures, which allowed them to have significantly greater damage output than other Tier 5 players. Secondly, Desolate Fury, Cross, and La Roja were Golden Masters, and a team that had the assistance of 3 Golden Masters could perform much better than even the various Pseudo-Apex Powers teams. While Gentle Snow and the others left for the underground Crystal Palace, Shifeng and Orbith visited a deserted area in the Crystal City and used Aurelia's key to teleport to the Golden Spire. Golden Spire. After the bright teleportation array faded, a magnificent spire that was 10 kilometers in height appeared before Shifeng's eyes. The spire was ancient, radiating a powerful divine might that prevented players under Tier 5 from approaching. Although Tier 5 players could approach the spire, their movements would become stiff when enveloped by its divine might. Only experts with basic attributes that had reached the Tier 6 standard could remain unaffected by the divine might. There sure are a lot of people. Shifeng couldn't help but be astonished when he saw the large gathering of players outside the Golden Spire. At a glance, well over 10,000 players were gathered outside the Golden Spire. It should be known that these were only the players who had yet the spire. Who knew how many more people were inside the spire? Of the several times he had visited the Golden Spire during his previous life, he had never come across so many players coming to challenge the Golden Spire. Orbith was also surprised by this situation. She had not expected to see so many players challenging the Golden Spire, and she couldn't help but feel tricked. After all, the keys to the Golden Spire weren't as rare and valuable as the rumors suggested. Before Shifeng and Orbith could recover from their surprise, a young man, who was a level 158, Tier 5 Berserker, approached them. "Would you two like to join our team to enter the Golden Spire?" the Berserker youth asked as he looked at Shifeng and Orbith. "Is it necessary to team up to enter the Golden Spire?" Shifeng couldn't help but be confused as he looked at the Berserker youth, whose combat standard was at the 5th floor standard. The Golden Spire wasn't a dungeon. Instead, it was a place that offered all who entered a standardized trial. There was no need for players to team up. "It won't be necessary inside, but it's a different story if you want to enter the Golden Spire," the Berserker youth said with a wry smile. Then, he pointed at the Golden Spire's entrance and said in frustration, "Do you see those people? They are all experts from the various pseudo-apex powers. You have just arrived, so you might not know, but those pseudo-apex powers have blocked the entrance and stated that nobody can enter before their members inside come out. If you want to force your way inside, you will need to have sufficient strength and qualifications. For example, if you are a member of a pseudo-apex power, and your team has sufficient 5th floor experts, they will let you through since they know it wouldn't be worth fighting you. If you can't meet these two conditions, they'll kill you on the spot if you try to force your way in." Hearing the Berserker youth's explanation, Shifeng swept his gaze across the 100 or so players standing in the way of the Golden Spire's entrance. All these experts were at the 5th floor standard, and the guild emblems they wore came in 7 varieties. Among them, the ones Shifeng was familiar with were the Scarlet Merchant Alliances and Flaming Bees guild emblems. Shifeng also spotted the guild emblem of Star Dynasty, one of the Greater God's domain's 9 great pseudo-apex powers. You can probably tell who the old man standing in the lead is, right? He's the Demon Axe War God, one of Star Dynasty's elders. Not only is he a veteran saint, but he is also a Golden Master. It's best if you don't try to provoke him. He has killed over 1,000 experts thus far, the Berserker youth explained when he saw Shifeng looking somewhat stunned. However, what the Berserker youth didn't know was that Shifeng wasn't stunned because of Demon Axe but by a woman standing some distance away from Demon Axe. The woman in question wore a dark purple robe. She was stunningly beautiful like a fairy, and her every move radiated a seductive charm. Meanwhile, this woman was none other than Aqua Rose, one of Zero Wing's vice guild leaders in Shifeng's previous life. TL notes: 1. Demon Axe War God. This is a title. It is based off of his trademark move, Demon Axe. Spoilers. I will refer to him as Demon Axe in subsequent chapters as I do not know his actual ID, and it sounds long-winded to keep repeating Demon Axe War God. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3465, Chapter 539, Black Flame? Chapter 3465, Chapter 539, Black Flame? Chapter 539, Black Flame? Why is she here? Shifeng was genuinely surprised when he saw Aqua Rose standing outside the Golden Spire's entrance. During his previous life, Aqua Rose's life trajectory experienced massive changes due to his intervention. Firstly, she no longer worked for Twilight Echo. Instead, she chose to join Zero Wing and became Zero Wing's vice guild leader. Later on, she got promoted to Tier 6 and supervised Zero Wing's rapid development across multiple realms simultaneously. Eventually, she even became one of the key figures who spearheaded Zero Wing's entry into the 12 Sanctuaries and led Zero Wing's fight against the various Apex powers. Meanwhile, as one of Zero Wing's 5 great experts, Aqua Rose not only mastered 2 gold combat techniques, but she even acquired a fragmented divine artifact, one, and became capable of fighting primordial gods of the same level. In this life, though, Aqua Rose should have experienced a similar situation as other Tier 6 experts from their homeworld and entered the greater god's domain through some special means. Only, Shifeng didn't think he would meet Aqua Rose in the eternal realm of all places. Moreover, the current Aqua Rose differed greatly from the Aqua Rose in Shifeng's previous life. The Aqua Rose in Shifeng's previous life was always brimming with vitality and fighting spirit, but the current Aqua Rose was inexplicably calm, like a lone wanderer who had experienced countless crises. And although the current Aqua Rose was not as strong as the Aqua Rose in Shifeng's previous life, she was still a bona fide 5th floor expert. She could undoubtedly be considered one of the strongest experts in their homeworld. In addition, as if determined by fate, the current Aqua Rose wielded the same fragmented divine staff, too, she used in Shifeng's previous life. Breath of the Deep Sea. With the assistance of Breath of the Deep Sea, even if Aqua Rose was currently only a level 158, Tier 5 expert, she had a great chance of defeating Tier 5 saints wielding legendary weapons. Is that beauty an acquaintance of yours? Orbeth asked out of curiosity when she saw Shifeng staring at Aqua Rose. Something like that, Shifeng said in an uncertain tone. They were indeed very familiar with each other during his previous life. After all, Zero Wing's daily operations largely depended on Aqua Rose, with Gentle Snow and Blackie acting as her assistants. However, in this life, he had spent the first 10 years of God's domain working as the guild leader of some no-name guild, whereas Aqua Rose held the position of honorary elder of Twilight Echo, a top-tier first-rate guild. They had 0 interactions with each other. Even now, this remained true. So, he couldn't really say that they were acquaintances. Something like that. Orbeth grew confused. She couldn't understand how someone could be something like an acquaintance. Regardless, after taking another look at Aqua Rose in the distance, she softly said, "I don't know what your relationship is with her, but I can tell you that she's not some random nobody. Based on my sources, one of the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's taboos has taken a liking to her and signed a blood contract with her. So long as she joins Scarlet in the future, she'll easily become one of the greats there." A blood contract. Realization dawned upon Shifeng when he heard Orbeth's explanation. Blood contracts weren't uncommon in God's domain. It could be considered a way for players to grant other players strength. Or, more specifically, a blood contract could grant the contractee the combat experiences of the contractor, letting them personally experience the battles the contractor had experienced. However, the creation of a blood contract was not a simple task. Firstly, the contractor had to reach the 2-star Great Grandmaster standard in their mental strength development. Secondly, the contractor needed the materials to create a blood contract. Meanwhile, most of the materials needed were at the inferior divine rank. Lastly, the contractor had to invest roughly 2 to 5 years of their time and energy into creating the blood contract. Throughout this period, the only thing the contractor could do was immerse their combat experiences into the blood contract. Because of these 3 stringent factors, typically only pseudo-apex powers and apex powers could create blood contracts. Weaker powers had neither the resources nor the ability to create one. Outside the Golden Spire's entrance. "I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you after we enter the spire." Aqua, a level 157, Tier 5 cleric dressed in a holy white robe said apologetically as she walked up to Aqua Rose. Big Brother Dragon Soul had to go ahead and enter the spire first. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to pass the trial before the other powers' chosen ones and obtain the best reward. Though, if we had Big Brother Dragon Soul here to help us, none of the other pseudo-apex powers would have dared to lay a hand on us, Nor would the Star Dynasty's demon axe be pointing fingers at us now. I understand, Melody. You don't have to apologize. Helping you is also something I should do, Aqua Rose said as she looked at the cleric named Seven Melody. Then, she glanced at the stalwart berserker standing in front of the Golden Spire's entrance and inwardly sighed as she thought to herself, the strength gap truly is huge. Sure enough, only the pseudo-apex powers chosen ones can fight against these golden masters. The trip to the Golden Spire this time might seem like a joint effort between the 7 pseudo-apex powers, but in reality, it was a competition between the 7 pseudo-apex powers chosen ones. Although Aqua Rose had the fortune of catching the eye of one of the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's taboos due to Seven Melody and received significant improvements to her combat standards, among the experts visiting the Golden Spire this time, she could barely be considered above average. And in front of an expert like the Demon Axe War God, she was an insignificant existence. It's a pity you refused to get together with Big Brother Dragonsoul and join our family. Otherwise, with your talent, you would have definitely received a slot to enter the Golden Spire's upper level first, Seven Melody said as she looked at Aqua Rose with a hint of pity. If you could secure the upper level's rewards, you can definitely become a powerhouse in the Eternal Realm in the future. At that time, you and your family can move into a special tier city, and even people from Demon's Gate would be helpless against you. Become a powerhouse in the Eternal Realm? Aqua Rose smiled and shook her head. How can it be that easy? Not to mention, if I join your family, Demon's Gate will also point its sword at your family. After finding herself in the Greater God's domain through a fortunate event, Aqua Rose originally thought she could operate freely because of her status as a Tier 6 expert. However, after wandering about the Greater God's domain for some time, she learned that even Tier 6 players could barely get by here. By the way, I heard someone from your homeworld got onto the Sacred Glory list. He even caused multiple upper-ranking hegemonic powers to suffer immense losses, Seven Melody suddenly said. With his talents, if he has enough fortuitous encounters, he might also be able to become a powerhouse in the Eternal Realm. You mean Black Flame? In a plain tone, Aqua Rose said, he has indeed made a name for himself in the Eternal Realm, but what he has seen thus far is only the tip of the iceberg the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers have to show. Not to mention, there are still pseudo-apex powers and apex powers above upper-ranking hegemonic powers. While Aqua Rose and Seven Melody quietly conversed, two people approached the Golden Spire's entrance. Of the two, one was male, the other was female, and both were of the swordsman class. Seeing the two swordsmen, a middle-aged level 158, Tier 5 saint-ranked berserker guarding the entrance impatiently said, "Do you two not see that our 7 guilds are busy here? Get lost if you're smart. Get lost. Are you talking about yourselves?" Shifeng asked. As soon as Shifeng's words fell, the whole area went silent. Whether it was the players standing around the Golden Spire or the 7 pseudo-apex powers members, everyone looked at Shifeng in disbelief. Meanwhile, when Aqua Rose saw the familiar figure she had just recently seen on the latest Sacred Glory list, her eyes widened. Black Flame. TL Notes 1, 2, Fragmented Divine Artifact. I'm not sure whether this is supposed to be a divine artifact or a fragmented divine artifact. In the first instance, 1, the author mentioned divine artifact, but in the second instance, 2, the author wrote fragmented divine artifact. For the time being, I'll leave it as fragmented divine artifact. It could also be possible that Breath of the Deep Sea is a fragmented divine artifact that could be upgraded repaired into a divine artifact. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3466, Chapter 540, Slaying a God with One Hand. Chapter 3466, Chapter 540, Slaying a God with One Hand. Chapter 540, Slaying a God with One Hand. What a crazy bastard. What gave him the courage to provoke the 7 pseudo-apex powers people? That guy's suicidal. Does he not see all the death drops scattered around the entrance? Everyone was shocked by Shifeng's blatant provocation. Shifeng wasn't the first person to have tried to get past the 7 pseudo-apex powers blockade and enter the Golden Spire, but everyone who previously tried had done so with a negotiating attitude. None dared to even speak loudly to the 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers members. Even so, the 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers members still killed those people to set an example. But now that Shifeng had taken the initiative to provoke the 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers, nobody could imagine what the 7 powers would do to Shifeng and his companion. Kid, you have guts, I'll give you that. But do you really think you can talk big in front of us just because you too are wearing Azure Fang's emblem? The middle-aged berserker laughed. Or do you think we will back away because of Azure Fang? The other 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers members laughed along with the middle-aged berserker. It was true that Azure Fang was a Pseudo-Apex Power, but which of their 7 guilds wasn't one? Not to mention, leading their group was Star Dynasty, one of the 9 great Pseudo-Apex Powers. With their lineup, not even Azure Fang's guild leader would dare to behave so arrogantly in front of them. At this time, because of the commotion Shifeng caused, even Demon Axe, who had been resting his eyes, had turned to look at Shifeng. Azure Fang? Turning to the middle-aged berserker, Shifeng calmly said, "Since when have I said I was a member of Azure Fang? You're not from Azure Fang?" The middle-aged berserker looked at Shifeng in confusion. Then, upon taking a closer look, he found that Shifeng, indeed, wasn't wearing Azure Fang's guild emblem. Only the blood elf standing next to him was. And at this discovery, he couldn't help but ask, "Which guild are you from, then?" It was true that Azure Fang didn't have the qualifications to behave arrogantly before them, but it would be a different story if Shifeng were a member of one of the 9 great Pseudo-Apex Powers or an Apex Power. At this time, the other 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers members also grew serious, none daring to laugh at Shifeng anymore. It might still be fine if Shifeng was only a member of the 9 great Pseudo-Apex Powers, but they would be in deep trouble if he were from an Apex Power. Not even the 9 great Pseudo-Apex Powers would dare to offend an Apex Power. The Golden Spire was crucial for the various powers' development, and everyone had to pay a great price to come here. If they were to kill an Apex Powers member here, even if said Apex Power wasn't strong enough to retaliate against them in the Eternal Realm, that didn't mean said Apex Power couldn't conduct its retaliation outside the Eternal Realm. Meanwhile, under everyone's anxious gaze, Shifeng proudly said, "Zero Wing." Zero Wing? Everyone was momentarily stunned as they looked at Shifeng's proud expression, their brains rapidly trying to recall which Apex Power went by the name of Zero Wing. Unlike everyone else, though, Aqua Rose couldn't help but look at Shifeng in exasperation. She couldn't believe Shifeng would be so bold to speak the truth. And to say it in such a prideful manner. "Are you messing with me, you little punk?" the middle-aged berserker bellowed after he finished recollecting his memories. "I've never heard of any Apex Power called Zero Wing, you must be tired of living." Meanwhile, shortly after the middle-aged berserker finished speaking, some of the people present quickly recognized Shifeng. "Zero Wing? I know who he is. His Zero Wing's Black Flame. Now that you mention it, he does look like Black Flame. So, he's the guy who caused a couple of upper-ranking hegemonic powers to eat a huge loss? No wonder he's so arrogant. For someone with no background, coming in 11th on the Sacred Glory list is indeed a great achievement. In any other realm in the greater God's domain, such an achievement certainly gives him bragging rights. It's a pity he's in the Eternal Realm. He has no idea what terrifying existences he is going up against. After the publication of the latest Sacred Glory list, many players throughout the greater God's domain came to learn of the name Black Flame. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the various pseudo-apex powers, experts on the Sacred Glory list were still nothing but jokes. "It looks like it's about to end," Aqua Rose muttered, sighing when Aqua Rose saw the 7 pseudo-apex powers experts getting ready for a fight. When she first arrived in the greater God's domain, she had similarly thought that none of the greater God's domain's powers dared to provoke her because she was a tier 6 player. It wasn't until she offended the Apex Power Demon's Gate that she came to understand how terrifying Apex powers were. In fact, not to mention Apex powers, even pseudo-Apex powers could easily put a tier 6 player into despair if they revealed so much as a small portion of their capabilities. While Aqua Rose was distracted with her thoughts, Demon Axe suddenly moved. In the blink of an eye, Berserker, who had been guarding the Golden Spire's entrance all this time, arrived before Shifeng. "What? Demon Axe is taking action himself?" Demon Axe taking action was outside of everyone's expectations. Even the middle-aged berserker who was about to teach Shifeng a lesson was shocked by this development. After all, Demon Axe had only ever taken action against groups of experts thus far. He had never bothered to move against individual players. His using his trademark move. When Aqua Rose saw the Demon Axe War God's movements, she instantly knew that the other party was using his trademark move, and she couldn't help but be shocked by this development. The Demon Axe War God was titled as such because of his mastery over the gold combat technique Demon Axe. It was with this technique that the Demon Axe War God spread his fame across the greater god's domain. Although Demon Axe wasn't at tier 6 right now, the combination of his gold combat technique and legendary axe allowed him to exhibit power on par with a tier 6 player's full-powered attack. If Aqua Rose were to face this attack herself, even if she had a fragmented divine artifact in hand, she would have to use an invulnerability skill to keep herself alive. None of her other means would let her survive Demon Axe's attack. But just when Demon Axe's pitch-black axe was about to connect with its target, Shifeng suddenly appeared above Demon Axe, the blue longsword in his hand already descending toward the tier 5 berserker. Radiant Night. Holy Annihilation. PTCH black flames emerged from the winter of eternal night as it closed in on Demon Axe. Though, it did not land on Demon Axe directly, as the latter had redirected his weapon's trajectory and used his attack to defend himself. Boom. When axe and longsword collided, pitch-black flames rose into the air. When the flames dissipated, Demon Axe could be seen kneeling on the ground and looking up at Shifeng in disbelief, a long gash running from his shoulder to his chest. Then, whilst confusion filled his mind, Demon Axe collapsed to the ground, becoming deader than dead. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3467, Chapter 541, Golden Spire's Trial. Chapter 3467, Chapter 541, Golden Spire's Trial. Chapter 541, Golden Spire's Trial. Demon Axe's fall plunged the surrounding players into an unprecedented shock. Demon Axe was not only a veteran tier 6 berserker god but also someone who had mastered a gold combat technique. Even if he was currently at tier 5, few players of the same tier could block his trademark move and live to tell the tale. Even the various pseudo-apex powers chosen ones, individuals who had received priority nurturing and mastered gold combat techniques, could only match Demon Axe in a frontal clash. Yet, now, the mighty Demon Axe War God had failed to survive even a move against Shifeng. Moreover, this was after he had blocked Shifeng's attack with his own. This was beyond inconceivable. More importantly, if even the Demon Axe War God had faced such a conclusive demise, who else present could possibly survive more than a move against Shifeng? When the middle-aged berserker saw Shifeng slaying Demon Axe in one move, he couldn't help but wipe the sweat coating his forehead. At the same time, he celebrated the fact that he was slower than Demon Axe to make a move against Shifeng. Otherwise, he'd be the one in Demon Axe's shoes instead. Meanwhile, Aqua Rose, who had been wearing a grim expression up to this point, couldn't help but widen her eyes and gasp in shock at how the clash unfolded. Of all the members the 7 pseudo-apex powers had mobilized to the Golden Spire this time, only the chosen ones nurtured by the 7 pseudo-apex powers with everything they've got could win against Demon Axe. Even then, it would be a narrow victory. So, Aqua Rose couldn't even begin to imagine how powerful Shifeng was to be able to achieve such a decisive victory over Demon Axe. However, what Aqua Rose didn't know was that Shifeng was currently equipped with the Grey Moon secret treasure set, which boosted his mana protection to the tier 6 standard. Because of this, when he used Holy Annihilation, the mana technique would perform no differently than if a true tier 6 player executed it. Unless his opponent had a fragmented divine artifact or tier 6 mana protection, trying to stop his Holy Annihilation as a tier 5 player would be no different than charging headfirst into a moving train. Of those present, only Orbith seemed unsurprised by this outcome. It was as if she had known this would happen long ago, and she simply observed the various pseudo-apex powers members surrounding them with a look of interest. "Do you still wish to stand in our way?" Shifeng asked as he surveyed the 100 or so experts surrounding him and Orbith. His expression remained calm, behaving as if what he did was trivial. If this fight had happened before he grasped the gold combat technique flowing space, he would have indeed had difficulty killing Demon Axe. The best he could do was rely on the Grey Moon set's effects to gradually whittle down the other party. However, after grasping flowing space, Shifeng no longer feared fights with players of the same tier. Even Golden Masters of the same tier would have a headache facing him. Not to mention, Demon Axe was only an expert who had mastered an offensive gold combat technique, making him no different than a glass cannon in front of Shifeng. So long as he gave Shifeng an opportunity, Shifeng could finish him on the spot. Don't get conceited just because you killed Demon Axe, Black Flame. Even if you enter the Golden Spire, our chosen ones won't spare you. That's right. You might not fear us because you've mastered a gold body technique, but our chosen ones have mastered more than just one type of gold combat technique. Several of them have even mastered gold body techniques. You're finished, Black Flame. You might still have a chance if you're up against those upper-ranking hegemonic powers, but going against our 7 pseudo-apex powers will be your end in the Eternal Realm. Nobody can save you now. The 7 pseudo-apex powers members sneered as they looked at Shifeng, their confidence growing as they spoke. They even convinced themselves that Shifeng would be eliminated from the Eternal Realm in the near future. Is that so? Then, come forward and show me what you're made of. Shifeng sneered as he took a step forward. Immediately, the 100 or so experts surrounding Shifeng subconsciously took a step back, as if there existed an invisible wall between them and Shifeng. And following this, every step forward Shifeng took, these experts would take one step backward, nobody daring to stay within 50 yards of him. This sight stunned the players present around the Golden Spire once more. All of the 7 pseudo-apex powers members present were 5th floor experts, and quite a few of them were even saint-ranked experts. Normally, a team of such a composition would be feared anywhere they went. Yet, now, all these experts behaved like cowardly sheep in front of Shifeng. Even after Shifeng had stepped into the Golden Spire with Orbith and vanished from everyone's vision, the 7 pseudo-apex powers members still did not dare move within 50 yards of the Golden Spire's entrance. An expert. This is how a true expert should be. Black Flame is too strong. If I could experience such a situation even once, I'd have no more regrets in my life. When the surrounding players saw Shifeng and Orbith disappearing into the Golden Spire, they couldn't help but verbalize their admiration for Shifeng. Some had even started posting the videos they had just recorded onto the Eternal Realms official forum to let everyone know what a true expert looked like. Aqua Rose was also greatly shocked by this situation. She didn't think Shifeng would be so strong as to deter the 7 pseudo-apex powers experts from putting up even the slightest form of resistance. He was easily 10 times stronger than in the video the 7 Luminaries Alliance had attached to the Sacred Glory list. She found it truly hard to imagine such an expert had remained unknown for so long in their homeworld. Demon Axe is dead, and the various powers are in chaos. Let's use this chance to enter the spire, Aqua. 7 Melody suggested to Aqua Rose when she saw the members of the 6 remaining pseudo-apex powers falling into disarray. Also, although Black Flame is extraordinarily strong, I still don't think he'll be a match for the chosen ones inside. But if we get him to join us and team up with Big Brother Dragon Soul, it'll benefit us all. Aqua Rose fell into thought when she heard 7 Melody's suggestions. There were quite a few of the 7 pseudo-apex powers members inside, and all of them were competing with each other. Even the Scarlet Merchant Alliance members inside weren't united at heart. If they could get Black Flame to join their group, it would help them greatly in surviving the competition. Alright, let's head inside as well. Immediately, Aqua Rose and 7 Melody used the chaos to sneak into the Golden Spire. Aside from them, many other players had also used this opportunity to charge into the Golden Spire. Inside the Golden Spire, when their blurred vision recovered, Shifeng and Orbith found themselves standing in front of a grand staircase in the clouds. The staircase was incredibly wide, at least several kilometers wide at first glance, and each step was 1 meter high and 2 meters long. Obviously, these steps were not made for humans but for larger races. The staircase extended to a great height, but because the density of the clouds increased with height, it was impossible to see anything beyond 1,000 meters. Moreover, Violent mana enveloped the staircase. Even with an advanced legendary mana body, Shifeng could feel his mana gradually getting influenced and going out of control. Sure enough, the magic elements here feel incredible no matter how many times I come here. When Shifeng sensed the dense magic elements around him and felt his mana being affected, he couldn't help but be astonished. Whether it was when he visited this place as a Tier 6 player in his previous life or with a Tier 5 advanced legendary mana body in this life, his mana failed to resist the influence of the Golden Spire's mana regardless. Even Orbeth was not an exception to this phenomenon. Just as Shifeng was about to start climbing the staircase, a system notification suddenly rang in his ears. System: Primordial Abyssal Gods Legatee detected. Do you wish to activate the Advanced Abyssal Trial? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3468, Chapter 542, Advanced Abyssal Trial. Chapter 3468, Chapter 542, Advanced Abyssal Trial. Chapter 542, Advanced Abyssal Trial. An Advanced Abyssal Trial? Shifeng was caught off guard by the system notification. He had visited the Golden Spire more than once in his previous life. He had even conducted detailed research on the spire, and the information he held was no less than what the various apex powers possessed. However, he had never heard of the Golden Spire having an abyssal trial, much less an advanced abyssal trial. Normally, the greater god's domain's various powers could go all out to fight each other just to secure a clue relating to a primordial god. Some upper-ranking hegemonic powers and conglomerates had even perished because of this. Meanwhile, the primordial abyssal god was one of the strongest primordial gods that had ever existed. If it was made known that a clue relating to the primordial abyssal god was hidden in the Golden Spire, there was no way the various powers could sit still. Even the high and mighty apex powers wouldn't hesitate to start a war with each other. However, according to the information Shifeng collected, the Golden Spire's construction might involve ancient gods, but it was totally unrelated to primordial gods. Otherwise, the various apex powers would have long since occupied the Golden Spire. They would have never let other powers set even a foot into the spire. System: You have 3 minutes to decide whether to activate the Advanced Abyssal Trial. If no response is given, the Advanced Abyssal Trial will not be activated by default. Activate it. Shifeng decided without hesitation. The primordial abyssal god's legacy was extraordinary. Setting aside the fact that primordial god legacies were nearly impossible to find in the current greater god's domain, just participating in an abyssal trial was a fortuitous opportunity in and of itself. Shifeng had no doubts he could get promoted to Tier 6 with his current capabilities. However, the 100 refinement mana body quest required him to construct a legendary divine body, which was no easy feat. The construction of a divine body was different from a mana body. The stronger a divine body a player desired, the stronger the laws they needed to master to stabilize their divine body. Typically, an epic divine body required the mastery of one advanced law to stabilize. Although he had mastered 3 advanced laws, he wasn't sure if that was enough to stabilize a legendary divine body. If he could master more advanced laws through the help of the Abyssal Legacy, it would greatly increase his chances of constructing a legendary divine body. System: Advanced Abyssal Trial activated. Please climb to a height of 20,000 meters in the Golden Spire's upper level within 2 days. Rewards unknown. System: The countdown will begin as soon as you take your first step onto the lower level staircase. Please pay attention to your remaining time. Climb to a height of 20,000 meters in 2 days? Shifeng gasped when he saw the trial requirements, and he couldn't help but wonder if the main god system was joking with him. The Golden Spire was split into the lower and upper levels. Both levels measured 30,000 meters in height. Although players with the upper level's key could gain access to the spire's upper level, they still needed to start their ascent from the lower level. Moreover, for every 1,000 meters climbed, the trial's difficulty would increase. The average expert would typically need around 2 days just to get through the lower level. As for reaching the 20,000 meter mark on the upper level, that was an achievement that only 5 players had ever accomplished in Shifeng's previous life. In addition, over 99% of the players who challenged the upper level failed to even reach the 10,000-meter mark. Currently, even if Shifeng combined his past life's experiences with his current capabilities, he was only confident in reaching the 10,000-meter mark. As for the 20,000-meter mark, even if he had unlimited time, reaching it would be a huge challenge, let alone reaching it in 2 days. That was simply an impossible request. Just as Shifeng and Orbith were about to start climbing the staircase before them, 2 flashes of light appeared near them. When the lights faded, they revealed the figures of Aqua Rose and Seven Melody. When Seven Melody spotted Shifeng and Orbith, she approached them without hesitation and warmly spoke as if they were longtime acquaintances. "Please wait a moment, Guild Leader Black Flame. I have a tempting offer to make to you and your companion. May I have some of your time?" "A tempting offer? What is it?" Orbith asked as she scrutinized Seven Melody with a look of curiosity. "It is something that will allow you to gain a great harvest, 3rd Vice Guild Leader Orbith." "I promise," Seven Melody said, exposing Orbith's identity with a smile. Orbith's gaze turned a little wary when she heard Seven Melody's words. The changes to Azure Fang's 3rd Vice Guild Leader position were made in secret, and only a few people in Azure Fang were aware of it. Most other people in the guild only knew that someone else was sitting in the position of 3rd Vice Guild Leader. They weren't aware of exactly who was sitting in the position. "You don't need to look at me like that, Miss Orbith. I'm not a monster," Seven Melody said, smiling. "I am only here to discuss a collaboration between us. It is a collaboration that can bring both of our parties great benefits." "Collaboration? What kind of collaboration do you have in mind?" Shifeng asked out of curiosity. "Simple." Turning to Shifeng, Seven Melody said, "I have Legacy that holds a method to resist the lower levels mana, and it is the only copy in the Eternal Realm. This method can drastically lower the difficulty of your ascent. I can share it with you, but in exchange, I need you to help us reach the upper level as quickly as possible. I believe that we can both benefit greatly from this collaboration. After all, the sooner you reach the upper level, the more lucrative the final rewards you will receive. In addition, we can further our collaboration if we come across the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's Chosen Ones. If we work together with Scarlet's Chosen Ones, not even the other Pseudo-Apex Powers Chosen Ones will dare to find trouble with you. A method to resist the lower levels mana?" Shifeng couldn't help but look at Seven Melody in surprise. He had never heard of a mana resistance method recognized by the main god system for the Golden Spire's lower level. Normally, players could only research their own method of combating the lower levels mana. A standardized method was never found. After all, every player's mana body was different, and different mana bodies would react differently to the Golden Spire's mana. "Yes. It is something that the beautiful Aqua next to me acquired after going through great difficulty. You will not find a second copy of it in the Eternal Realm," Seven Melody said, nodding as she pointed at Aqua Rose. "You will most certainly regret it if you miss this opportunity. For your information, it has already been over 2 days since the 7 Pseudo-Apex Powers members entered the Golden Spire. They are probably scattered across both levels by now, and if you come across them, they will undoubtedly try to hinder your progress. Even if you can defeat them, it will take time and add difficulty to your trial. It will also affect the rewards you will receive. But with our mana resistance method, you can at least reduce some of the difficulties you will face and save yourself a lot of time." "Alright, I can agree to your conditions," Shifeng answered. Personally, he was quite intrigued by Seven Melody's suggestion. He was curious to see what kind of mana resistance method could be universally applied to all players. Not to mention, accepting Seven Melody's offer would allow him to help and get acquainted with Aqua Rose. "I'm fine with it, too," Orbith said, nodding. "Great. Let's have a happy collaboration, then," Seven Melody happily said before taking out an ancient stone tablet. "Then," she continued, "try to learn the method on this tablet as quickly as possible. There are going to be more people coming in a moment." When Seven Melody took out the stone tablet, the corners of Shifeng's mouth immediately twitched after just taking a casual glance at it, the shock he currently experienced no less intense than when he triggered the advanced abyssal trial. A primordial god tablet. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3469, Chapter 543, Primordial God-Ranked Mana Technique. Chapter 3469, Chapter 543, Primordial God-Ranked Mana Technique. Chapter 543, Primordial God-Ranked Mana Technique. Well, are you two done learning it? Seven Melody urgingly asked as she looked at Shafong and Orbeth. There is limited space in the trial area, and many more people will be entering soon. If we have to resist the trial's attacks within a limited space, the difficulty we have to face will increase, so we need to move quickly. However, despite Seven Melody's urging, Shafong dared not rush himself and completely immersed himself in the information conveyed by the stone tablet. After all, this was a primordial god tablet they were talking about, and there were only a very small number of these tablets in the current Greater God's domain. Before the Holy Race's invasion, those who got their hands on a primordial god tablet were deceived by the tablet's unremarkable appearance. At first glance, the tablets looked like nothing more than records casually left behind by the myriad ancient gods. However, sometime after the Holy Race's invasion began, players began to discover the uniqueness of the primordial god tablets. Typically, a stone tablet left behind by an ancient god would only contain one mana interpretation method. Or, more specifically, these ancient god tablets could only be interpreted using one method, and they would also only yield one outcome. However, primordial god tablets were different in that they could be interpreted using numerous mana interpretation methods, and every different method used would yield a different result. After only glancing at the tablet Seven Melody took out, Shafong had already discerned over 10 methods to interpret it, which yielded him over 10 different methods of resisting mana. This situation allowed Shafong to understand why Seven Melody had determined that her stone tablet held a mana resistance method everyone could use. Of course, the numerous mana resistance methods recorded in the primordial god tablet were only one of its multiple aspects. What made a primordial god tablet truly incredible was the mana techniques they contained. Every primordial god tablet would have a mana technique legacy hidden in it. As for whether players could obtain this mana technique legacy, it all depended on whether they could find the corresponding mana interpretation method for it and whether they had the necessary talent and capabilities to learn the mana technique. The passing down of primordial god-ranked mana techniques had ceased during the mythical era. Although saints of future generations would later develop saint-ranked mana techniques, they were merely crude imitations of primordial god-ranked mana techniques. They weren't even 10% as powerful or effective. This was also why primordial gods were extremely powerful. During his previous life, Shafong had tried to find opportunities to learn a primordial god-ranked mana technique, but he never managed to secure one, even after offering to trade for it using a legendary equipment set. Yet, now, Seven Melody had given him this opportunity without hesitation. Even if she wasn't aware of what she had in her hands, it was unbelievable nonetheless. If he were to let this opportunity slip by him, he would definitely regret it. Are you two still not done? It's been 2 minutes already. Seven Melody started growing anxious when she saw that Shafong and Orbeth were still stuck learning from the tablet. Previously, when she and Aqua Rose studied the tablet, they didn't use more than 30 seconds. Meanwhile, as soon as they finished studying the tablet, the mana resistance method she spoke of was automatically generated and engraved in their minds. Yet, now, Shafong and Orbeth still weren't done studying the tablet after 2 minutes. With this much time, even a pig should have finished learning the mana resistance method already. Just a little longer. I'm finding some parts difficult to understand, Shafong awkwardly explained. This was his first time interpreting a primordial god tablet. He had also never learned how to interpret a primordial god tablet, as only powers with primordial god tablets would know the proper methods to do so. However, none of these powers would share their methods or their primordial god tablets with others. Even if these powers did share their methods, they likely wouldn't be useful. After all, the correct interpretation methods for every primordial god tablet were different. Meanwhile, in the 2 minutes he spent studying Seven Melody's primordial god tablet, he had already tried over 100 interpretation methods and obtained over 100 answers. But none of these answers led to a mana technique. Meanwhile, roughly 5 minutes after Shifeng started studying the primordial god tablet, a large group of players appeared at the bottom of the staircase. At a glance, there were easily over 1,000 players. After these players excitedly surveyed the Golden Spire's interior, they promptly charged up the staircase, none even bothering to glance at Shifeng's group of 4. 7 Melody felt as if her head was about to explode when she saw this, and she couldn't help but turn to Aqua Rose and whisper, "Aqua, are these 2 people truly experts? Why do I feel like they're just 2 blockheads?" "I don't know." Aqua Rose shook her head, similarly feeling puzzled as she watched Shifeng and Orbith completely focused on the stone tablet in 7 Melody's hand. The tablet's content is pretty simple. Logically, they should only need a few seconds to learn everything. Subsequently, time continued passing, and amidst Aqua Rose and 7 Melody's hushed conversation, Orbith suddenly took a deep breath and smiled. "I learned it." Orbith reported to 7 Melody, looking quite proud of herself. Hearing Orbith's report, 7 Melody didn't know what she should say in response. Should she praise her? 10 minutes. Orbith had used 10 minutes to accomplish what she had accomplished in less than 30 seconds, yet the Blood Elf behaved like a child who had just scored full marks on a test. For a moment, 7 Melody couldn't help but wonder if she had taken out the wrong tablet. At this time, Orbith noticed that Shifeng was still staring at the tablet, his body remaining motionless. "He seems to be stuck on something, just like you were before," Aqua Rose explained when she saw Orbith looking at Shifeng curiously. "Well, it is quite difficult." Orbith nodded to express her understanding. "If not for my foundation, I would have probably been stuck for a much longer time." 7 Melody grew even more speechless when she saw Orbith expressing her understanding. Were any foundations necessary to use a mana interpretation method on a stone tablet? Wasn't this something that could be accomplished by any player capable of manipulating mana? Meanwhile, after half an hour, a joyful exclamation suddenly sounded at the bottom of the Golden Spire's lower level. Hearing this, 7 Melody and Aqua Rose breathed a sigh of relief. This was because the joyful exclamation came from none other than Shifeng. "Finally! At long last! I've finally learned it." At this moment, the joy on Shifeng's face was apparent even to an ordinary person. His excitement could even infect those looking at his expression. However, 7 Melody and Aqua Rose could only roll their eyes at Shifeng when they saw his behavior. 30 minutes. In the half-hour they spent waiting for Shifeng to be done with learning the mana resistance method, they saw over 10,000 players entering the Golden Spire and ascending the lower-level staircase. With the addition of so many competitors, it would become even more difficult for them to catch up to the first batch of experts the Scarlet Merchant Alliance had sent into the Golden Spire. "Let's go," Shifeng said, awkwardly smiling when he saw the impatient look on 7 Melody's and Aqua Rose's faces. "Don't worry. I promise we can catch up to them in no time." Studying the primordial god tablet was not easy. He had used over 1,000 mana interpretation methods before he finally found the one that led him to the mana technique recorded on the tablet. Fortunately, the mana technique recorded on the tablet just so happened to be incredibly useful for him. This was because the mana technique was a sword technique meant for swordsmen. The primordial god-ranked mana technique, Dark Moon, it was a well-known mana technique in the greater god's domain, and it was also the trademark technique of the blood-soaked Rakshasa. What excited Shifeng, even more, was the identity of the creator behind this primordial god-ranked mana technique. The Goddess of Space. Despite not being a primordial god, the Goddess of Space had created a primordial god-ranked mana technique. For players who weren't primordial gods, Dark Moon was undoubtedly the easiest to learn out of all primordial god-ranked mana techniques in existence. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3470 Chapter 544 Initial Mastery over the Law of Space. Chapter 3470 Chapter 544 Initial Mastery over the Law of Space. Chapter 544 Initial Mastery over the Law of Space. Catch up in no time? 7 Melody couldn't help but roll her eyes at Shifeng, feeling both angry and exasperated. The Golden Spire's trials were tailored toward individual players. If players could pass the trials, they could continue to advance. If not, they would be stuck where they were, and outsiders wouldn't be able to help them. In addition, there was limited space inside the Golden Spire. So, the more players there were challenging Golden Spire, the less space players had to maneuver around, which would, in turn, increase the difficulty of their trials. Currently, more than 10,000 players were already inside the Golden Spire, and these players had nearly a 30-minute head start over their group of 3. If they were to start their climb now, the difficulty of the trials they faced would be substantially greater, and the time they needed to overcome the trials would most certainly be longer than normal. So, even if they did catch up to these 10,000-plus players, 7 Melody wasn't even sure if she and Aqua Rose could outcompete the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's paragons who had entered the Golden Spire in the first batch. Apart from the chosen ones cultivated by the Scarlet Merchant Alliance, the competition between the guild's paragons was extraordinarily intense. While she might have an upper-level key for the Golden Spire in her possession, she couldn't use it to enter the upper level at her discretion. Whether she could use it to enter the upper level still depended on the time she used to complete the lower level. After all, upper-level keys were hard to come by. The Scarlet Merchant Alliance naturally wouldn't waste such a precious resource on individuals who took too much time to complete the lower level. However, Shifeng didn't bother to explain himself. He simply smiled and stepped onto the staircase before him. Dark Moon, the goddess of space's legacy, was incredibly profound. The mana technique was split into 7 moves: the Sword of Earth, the Sword of Water, the Sword of Wind, the Sword of Fire, the Sword of Time, the Sword of Illusion, and the Sword of Space. The 7 moves were an advanced application of the 4 major elements and the 3 supreme elements. There were no differences in strength between the 7 moves. Each move had its strengths. Meanwhile, Dark Moon utilized the element of space as its core, and the element allowed for the continuous integration of other magic elements. When all 7 elements were merged into one, the user of Dark Moon could fight primordial gods of the same tier. Although Shifeng had yet to master any of the 7 moves, through the information he gained from the goddess's legacy, he had already gained initial mastery over the law of space, which could be considered as him having learned the Dark Moon mana technique. By manipulating the space element, he could not only fully stabilize his mana, but he could even spread it out to create a mana domain inside the Golden Spire. While he couldn't extend his mana domain as far out as he normally could, he could ensure its absolute stability within a 50-yard radius. Gaining mastery over the space element also enlightened Shifeng on why, despite the primordial god tablet having various mana resistance methods, any of these methods could allow players to resist the Golden Spire's rampant mana. "Let's go as well, Melody," Aqua Rose said persuasively as she looked at the exasperated cleric beside her. "There might be some changes to the plan, but at least none of those outside experts will dare to make a move against us." The Golden Spire had lucrative rewards. This was something everyone knew. But not everyone could get their hands on these rewards, and some selfish individuals might choose to sabotage others once they knew they had no chance of proceeding any further. However, with Shifeng acting as a deterrent, it was unlikely anyone would dare to target their group. "I guess you're right." After thinking it over, 7 Melody could only use Aqua Rose's reasoning to console herself. Subsequently, 7 Melody and Aqua Rose also stepped onto the staircase, intending to pass through the lower levels trials as quickly as possible. Players would face a trial every 1,000 meters they ascended in the Golden Spire. According to the information the Scarlet Merchant Alliance obtained, these trials required players to break through a magic barrier while fighting against magic puppets of the same tier. Every magic puppet was at the refinement realm standard by default, and they could only damage the players they were summoned to target. Moreover, the magic puppets would grow stronger with numbers. For every 3 magic puppets on the battlefield, they could form a small battle array that would increase their basic attributes and elevate their combat standards by 1 rank. For every 3 small battle arrays present, they could form a medium battle array that would elevate the magic puppet's basic attributes to the standard of archaic species and combat standards to the void realm. For every 3 medium battle arrays present, they could form a large battle array that would increase the magic puppet's basic attributes to the standard of ferocious beasts and grant every one of them the ability to use domains. If surrounded by these enhanced magic puppets, Even fifth-floor experts would lose their lives if they weren't careful. While facing the attacks of these magic puppets, players needed to break the magic barrier hindering their advance as quickly as possible. Otherwise, once a set amount of time passed, the magic barrier would fully regenerate, and players would have to start breaking the barrier all over again. Furthermore, for every trial players completed, the number of magic puppets they faced would increase by 3. And for every 10,000 meters they climbed, the gravity they experienced and the volatility of the mana surrounding them would double. Meanwhile, the instant 7 Melody and Aqua Rose ascended 1,000 meters up the staircase, their first trial began, and 6 magic puppets appeared a short distance away from them. The 6 magic puppets charged at the 2 players in groups of 3, and each group was empowered by a small battle array. In this rampant mana environment, a 4th-floor expert would have to expend a lot of energy just to cope with these magic puppets. However, just as 7 Melody and Aqua Rose were about to rely on their formidable basic attributes to repel the magic puppets, a familiar voice suddenly entered their ears. Kneel. Following this voice, the crisp sound of 3 objects hitting the ground came from nearby. When 7 Melody and Aqua Rose turned toward the source of these sounds, they saw 3 magic puppets falling flat onto the floor as if something heavy was crushing them. How is this possible? 7 Melody exclaimed, her mouth having difficulty closing when she saw the owner of the voice. The person who had immobilized the 3 magic puppets was none other than Shifeng, the person who had spent half an hour learning a mana resistance method. Mana domain. He's using his mana domain. Aqua Rose muttered in shock as she looked at Shifeng. She was able to quickly determine the cause of the 3 magic puppet situation. He can use his mana domain here. Apart from a mana domain, Aqua Rose could think of no other explanation for how Shifeng managed to suppress the magic puppets with words alone. But the problem was that the Golden Spire's mana environment destabilized players' mana. In such a situation, even fighting normally was an impossible task, let alone creating a mana domain that was strong enough to suppress enemies thoroughly. This situation was even more unbelievable than fantasy. Has he already mastered the law of space? At this time, Orbith was similarly looking at Shifeng in astonishment, but the cause for her surprise was different from that of 7 Melody and Aqua Rose. As someone who had learned the goddess of space's Dark Moon legacy, Orbith could more or less guess how Shifeng could use his mana domain inside the Golden Spire. However, it was precisely because she knew how he did it that she couldn't help but be astonished. Previously, after spending 10 minutes analyzing 7 Melody's stone tablet, Orbith had arrived at the goddess of space's legacy. Then, after learning the goddess's legacy, she gained basic mastery over the space element, which allowed her to stabilize the mana in her body. Originally, Orbith thought that she was already a fast learner. But now, it was revealed that, even though Shifeng had taken more time to analyze the stone tablet than she did, he had gained greater mastery over the goddess's legacy than she did. After all, the fact that Shifeng could extend his mana beyond his physical body meant that he had already gained advanced mastery over the space element, which also meant that he had already gained initial mastery over the law of space. This was simply unbelievable. The rest of you kneel as well. When Shifeng saw the 6 magic puppets targeting 7 Melody and Aqua Rose resuming their charge, he spoke again. Immediately afterward, all 6 magic puppets fell to the ground and stopped moving. Then, he calmly said, "Let's go to the next trial." TL notes. 1. Kneel. This should have been translated as get down, but it could be misunderstood as Shifeng telling his allies to get down because he's gonna use some powerful AoE move, so I opted for kneel. It also sounds cooler. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3471, Chapter 545, Sudden Changes to the Golden Spire. Chapter 3471, Chapter 545, Sudden Changes to the Golden Spire. Chapter 545, Sudden Changes to the Golden Spire. Golden Spire, upper level. In a vast temple surrounded by clouds, a burst of colorful radiance suddenly appeared in the middle of the structure. Then, the lights disappeared to reveal 4 figures. We arrived, just like that. A pleasant voice sounded, causing the 100 or so players resting in the temple to turn their heads toward the source. The owner of the voice was a female cleric with a gentle and elegant appearance, and at first glance, she looked very much like an angel. Newcomers. Has another pseudo-apex power arrived at the Golden Spire? These people have such bad luck to appear at this time. Now, the upper-level key they went to great lengths to obtain has gone to waste. When the resting players saw the female clerics group appearing in the temple, some expressed surprise, some expressed ridicule, and some expressed pity. What's wrong with these people? Why are they looking at us like that? Seven Melody wondered in confusion. After scanning the temple, she could tell everyone was talking about their group. This is strange. This should be nearly everyone, if not everyone, who has reached the upper level, Aqua Rose commented. Logically, the first batch of players to have entered the spire should have arrived on the upper floor quite some time already. Even though we've taken only 11 hours to clear the lower level, it doesn't make for us to meet them here. These people also look exhausted, so they've clearly been through a lot of battles. Keys to the Golden Spire's upper level were incredibly rare. At most, only a couple dozen should have been found thus far. And since each key could only allow 2 players to enter the spire's upper level, the maximum number of players that could enter the upper level should only be a little over 100. In other words, the players resting in the temple should be most, if not all, of the players currently on the upper level. It should be known that their group of 4 had entered the Golden Spire 2 days later than the various guilds' first batch of players did. Logically, the players in the first batch should have long arrived and made significant progress on the upper level. So, it was incredibly strange for them to meet so many players at the upper level starting point. Amidst Seven Melody and Aqua Rose's confusion, an exclamation suddenly sounded from a corner of the temple. Little Seven? How did you get up here so quickly? The speaker was a female assassin dressed in black leather. She had a shapely figure, and she gave off a wild feeling. Although the assassin was masked, it was still possible to tell that she had a beautiful face based on her facial features. Big sis glow! Seven Melody exclaimed when she saw the female assassin. Then, she curiously asked, "Why are you still on the first trial? Shouldn't you have entered the upper level long ago?" Solitary Glow and Dragon Soul were the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's chosen ones of this generation. The two were about evenly matched in strength, and they were labeled as the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's most talented chosen ones in the past century. Even before reaching the age of 25, the two had already mastered a gold combat technique. Now, in their 30s, they had already mastered 2 gold combat techniques of different categories and received the guild's full support. Both of them were equipped with legendary equipment sets and top-tier legendary weapons, and at the same level and tier, they could fight against even the chosen ones nurtured by apex powers. "We are here by accident," the female assassin named Solitary Glow said, waving her hand. Then, she moved her sharp gaze over to Shafong and Orbeth, curiously asking, "Who are these two? Why did you arrive here with them?" "They're the reinforcements I found," Big Sis Glow, Seven Melody proudly said. "This man here is guild leader Black Flame, while this beautiful lady here is Azure Fang's Saintess. It is thanks to them that Aqua and I were able to arrive on the upper level so quickly. It only took them 11 hours to complete the lower level. They were several times faster than the various pseudo-apex powers paragons. Although some of the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's paragons waiting at the end of the lower level had initially thought of competing for the 2 slots she had for the upper level, they could only despair after learning of her and Aqua's clear speed. In fact, if not for the 2 of them being too slow at breaking the trial's magic barriers, Shafong and Orbeth could have completed the lower level in 6 hours. Guild leader Black Flame. When Solitary Glow heard Shafong's name, she suddenly thought of something as she looked at Shafong, feeling somewhat surprised, and asked, "Are you the one who killed Demon Axe and angered the Star Dynasty?" "Yes, that's me," Shafong nodded. "How brave of you." Seeing the calm look on Shafong, Solitary Glow couldn't help but give him a friendly reminder, saying, "Do you know that Sleeping Spark, one of the Star Dynasty's chosen ones, has already declared that he will kill you every time he sees you? He has also announced a reward of 5 eternal gold for anyone who reports your location in the Golden Spire." 5 eternal gold? Aqua Rose was astonished by the revelation. That much? 1 eternal gold was about as much as the average 4th floor expert owned in the current Eternal Realm, So paying 5 eternal gold for just a player's location was a huge extravagance. Now that even the various cities in the real world were buying up eternal coins, a fortune of 5 eternal gold would be enough for her to live extravagantly in a second-tier city for an entire year. How generous of them, 7 Melody commented in agreement. Even she didn't have 5 eternal gold on her right now. I heard that the secret treasures sold by the Crystal City of Secrets trading firm only cost about a dozen eternal gold. With the reward they're offering, I can already buy a common secret treasure after reporting guild leader Blackflame's location 3 times. Upon hearing 7 Melody's words, Shafong couldn't help but look at the cleric in surprise. He didn't think the secret crystal trading firm's fame had spread so much. You two shouldn't have come here, Solitary Glow said as she returned her gaze to 7 Melody and Aqua Rose. Not long ago, Sleeping Spark climbed to a height of 10,000 meters and caused a sudden change to the entire upper level. Aside from him, everyone else was teleported back to the starting point. In addition, the Trial's magic puppets have also undergone a qualitative transformation. Now, even the first Trial's magic puppets have domains, and every move they make is at the standard of an advanced bronze combat technique. Combined with the assistance of their small battle array, all 3 of the first Trial's magic puppets have combat standards at the 4th floor standard. Even if Dragon Soul and I keep you two safe from other players, the best you two can accomplish is clear the first trial. They've stepped into the realms of truth. 7 Melody was greatly surprised. Even when she climbed to 30,000 meters on the lower level, the combat standards of the magic puppets she faced only had access to a domain. They had no mastery over the realms of truth. If the upper level's magic puppets were as strong as Solitary Glow described, combined with the Golden Spire's volatile mana environment, even 5th floor experts would find their progression coming to a halt. After all, if the magic puppets could exhibit the power of bronze combat techniques with their every move, after factoring in the assistance of a small battle array, they would be able to unleash power at the Tier 6 standard. This would remove any advantages players had over the magic puppets. As for you two, I'm afraid you have come here for nothing, Solitary Glow said as she turned to Shafong and Orbeth. While I am grateful for you for bringing Little Seven and her friend here, you are currently being targeted by the Star Dynasty. All of the various Pseudo-Apex Powers members here have their eyes set on you too. Even if Dragon Soul and I try to help you, I don't think they will give up. When 7 Melody saw that Solitary Glow was hinting at Shafong and Orbeth to leave, she quickly interjected and said in a serious tone, Guild leader Black Flame and his friend are very strong, Big Sis Glow. If you join forces with them, you can definitely climb to greater heights. Very strong? Solitary Glow couldn't help but chuckle at 7 Melody's claim. How strong could someone ranked 11th on the Sacred Glory list possibly be? Even someone of her caliber would quickly fall when attacked by over 100 paragons and chosen ones from the various pseudo-apex powers. However, seeing the determination in 7 Melody's eyes, Solitary Glow ultimately sighed and said, "All right, then. Since they have helped you, it would be shameful of us to just stand by and watch. But let me make things clear. Our ability to resist is limited. If we can't hold on, your friends will have to rely on themselves." "Thank you, Big Sis Glow," 7 Melody said with a smile. "Okay, get ready. We'll start climbing the spire in 1 minute," Solitary Glow said before leaving to discuss the situation with Dragon Soul, who was resting some distance away. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3472, Chapter 546, Come and Meet Your Maker. Chapter 3472, Chapter 546, Come and Meet Your Maker. Chapter 546, Come and Meet Your Maker. 7 Melody breathed a sigh of relief shortly after Solitary Glow walked away. Solitary Glow and Dragon Soul were the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's chosen ones of this generation. They were slated to become the guild's taboos in the future, and their status was so high that they didn't even need to show respect to the guild's vice-guild leaders. Even though 7 Melody was the successor of her family, out of the 2 chosen ones, only Dragon Soul came from her family. Solitary Glow, on the other hand, was nurtured by the guild leader's family. So, if Solitary Glow refused to help her, there would be nothing Seven Melody could do about it. "I'm sorry, Guild Leader Black Flame," Seven Melody said as she looked at Shifeng apologetically. "Big Sis Glow doesn't mean any harm. It's just that upper-level keys are incredibly precious, and she is worried that me and Aqua will waste this opportunity." "I understand." Shifeng nodded, not minding Solitary Glow's attitude toward him. "If I were in her position, I wouldn't dare to recklessly help an outsider in the Golden Spire, either." Solitary Glow and Dragon Soul were very famous individuals during Shifeng's previous life. It was especially so for Solitary Glow. Aside from their strength, another factor that played into their fame was due to the splitting of the Scarlet Merchant Alliance. At the time, the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's guild leader had suddenly left the guild with a bunch of people to start his own guild called the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce. Then, after its establishment, the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce fought restlessly against the Scarlet Merchant Alliance. However, because the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's taboos remained with the guild, the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce was never a match for it. If not for Solitary Glow having the strength to hold off 3 of Scarlet's taboos by herself at the time, the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce wouldn't even be able to continue surviving in the Greater God's domain. Back then, the Scarlet Merchant Alliance had made numerous offers to pull Solitary Glow back to its side. However, no matter how tempting an offer Solitary Glow received, she had never agreed to defect from the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce. Ultimately, though, the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce still met its destruction after the Scarlet Merchant Alliance produced a new taboo, breaking the balance in strength. Meanwhile, after the Blood Drinking Chamber of Commerce disappeared from the Greater God's domain, Solitary Glow seemingly disappeared with it. She never joined another power or showed herself in public afterward, and a few Apex powers couldn't help but lament the situation. It wasn't just because the Greater God's domain had lost a loyal and powerful asset such as Solitary Glow. It was more so because the Scarlet Merchant Alliance could have become one of the 9 great pseudo-Apex powers and potentially even an Apex power in the future had it not experienced such a sudden internal split. Meanwhile, after meeting Solitary Glow in person, Shifeng could tell that she was indeed devoted to her guild, her behavior lacking any ulterior motives. If any other member of the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's guild leader's faction were in her place, they would be more than eager to see Seven Melody waste an upper-level key, as this would, in turn, weaken the influence of Seven Melody's faction. Not to mention, there were over a dozen Star Dynasty experts currently targeting their group of 4 in the temple. Among them, even the weakest among them was a level 157 saint, and every one of them also wielded a legendary weapon. If these experts were to work together, even if they were only at tier 5, they could still reign supreme over any kingdom in the outside world, and no power would dare to underestimate them. With all these experts targeting their group, nobody could fault Solitary Glow even if she refused to help their group. Honestly, if Zero Wing wasn't in the middle of clashing with multiple Apex powers in his previous life, Shifeng would have tried to recruit Solitary Glow into Zero Wing. Meanwhile, shortly after the exchange between Shifeng and Seven Melody, Solitary Glow and Dragon Soul approached their group. Dragon Soul was a giant of a man, his height coming in at 6 meters. He carried a large hammer made of white bones on his back, and every step he took shook the ground around him. Even though he was only a level 158, tier 5 berserker, he gave off the feeling of a bona fide tier 6 berserker god. "Let's go." After sweeping an indifferent glance at Shifeng and Orbith, Dragon Soul said, "When the Star Dynasty's people come for us later, Glow and I will stop their 2 chosen ones. As for the others, you will have to deal with them yourselves." "What arrogant words you have there, Dragon Soul. Do you really dare protect the people the Star Dynasty is targeting?" As soon as Dragon Soul finished speaking, a young male demi-dragon clad in black armor and wielding a large saber suddenly spoke up. "Do you think you are invincible in the Golden Spire just because you managed to survive a fight with Sleeping Spark? So, are you saying you can win against me, Black Tiger?" Dragon Soul said as he glanced at the demi-dragon with disdain. "If I say I'm going to protect them, nobody can touch them." The Star Dynasty had 4 chosen ones. However, apart from Sleeping Spark, Dragon Soul did not consider any of the other 3 chosen ones as worthy of his attention. If not for the interference of the Golden Spire's magic puppets, He and Solitary Glow could easily trample over the two other Star Dynasty chosen ones on the upper level. I would like to see you try, then. Suddenly, a low and crisp laugh sounded in the temple, and the nonchalant expressions of Dragon Soul and Solitary Glow immediately grew serious as they turned to look at the person who just spoke. The person who just spoke was a gorgeous woman in a red dress. She had long fiery red hair that cascaded down her back, and she was akin to a fire elemental as her mere presence caused the surrounding space to heat up. Evidently, the woman had already surpassed the standard of saints when it came to the use of the fire element. Are you planning to help the Star Dynasty, Scarlet? Dragon Soul asked, his expression darkening and a hint of fear flashing in his eyes as he looked at the gorgeous woman. At this time, Solitary Glow also wore an ugly expression as she whispered to Shafong and Orbith, "She's Flaming Bee's Scarlet Sorceress. She is no weaker than Dragon Soul and I. If she decides to help the Star Dynasty, I'm afraid you will have to give up on challenging the Golden Spire." Few people in the Greater Gods domain knew about Scarlet Sorceress. Firstly, it was because Flaming Bee had secretly nurtured Scarlet Sorceress as one of its chosen ones, and rarely would she take action in the Greater Gods domain. Secondly, most of those who had fought Scarlet Sorceress in actual battle had their existences immolated, with even their immortal souls being burnt to nothing. If not for Scarlet Sorceress taking action on the Golden Spire's upper level, none of them present would have known that Flaming Bee had been hiding such a chosen one. "I have no intentions of helping the Star Dynasty," Scarlet Sorceress said, shaking her head. Then, she turned to Shafong and continued, "I simply have some accounts to settle with Guild Leader Black Flame." "With me?" Shafong couldn't help but grow confused. He failed to recall ever having provoked Flaming Bee's Scarlet Sorceress. "What a forgetful person you are, Guild Leader Black Flame." Smiling faintly at Shafong, Scarlet Sorceress said, "Have you forgotten about Eternal's auction already? Thanks to you allying with the Blaze conglomerate, Flaming Bee lost its head start in the underground Crystal Palace. I was present at the auction and watched as you happily outbid us. I bet you never thought about today, right?" Following Scarlet Sorceress's words, Solitary Glow, Seven Melody, and Aqua Rose couldn't help but grow speechless at Shafong's ability to offend pseudo-apex powers. Meanwhile, Shafong laughed in response to Scarlet Sorceress's words. Then, after stepping onto the staircase connected to the temple, he nonchalantly glanced at Scarlet Sorceress and the Star Dynasty's members and said, "Do you think I need to?" As soon as Shafong finished speaking, dense mana spread from his body, instantly causing the three magic puppets that had appeared before him to kneel on the ground. Even though all three magic puppets were at the fourth floor standard, none could move an inch from where they stood, let alone get close to Shafong. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,